Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Rob Dietl, Director of Executive Programs at MIT Sloan Executive Education, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on the Internet of Things. Seems like we can't pick up a business publication or newspaper these days and not read something about how the IoT, or the Internet of Things, is changing the world and changing the workplace, and as a result is really changing the workforce. I'm especially delighted today to introduce you to my Associate Dean of Executive Education today, Peter Hirst, who will be sharing some of his insights on how the IoT is really transforming the workplace and creating different opportunities in executive education and beyond in terms of developing talent and preparing the workforce for the changes that are coming with IoT. Peter, as I mentioned, is Associate Dean of Executive Education here at MIT Sloan Executive Education. Formerly, he was the CEO of Commercialization, Consulting, and Executive Education business at the London School of Economics. He's also past president of the British American Business Council of New England and currently a trustee and treasurer of the American Foundation of the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, and co-chair of the Education Working Group of the Internet of Things World Forum. He's also a founding member of the Internet of Things Global Talent Consortium and is a board director and co-chair of the Digital Communications Subcommittee at Unicon. Peter earned his PhD from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland for research in plasma physics and microwave engineering. And in 2012, Peter was also named a member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, or MBE, by Queen Elizabeth II, in recognition of his service to British and American business and academic interests. So with that, over to Peter to hear some interesting insight on the IoT and how it's transforming the workplace.
Thank you very much, Rob. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to those of you who may be in other time zones, and greetings from the campus of MIT here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm Peter Hirst. As Rob explained, I'm the Associate Dean for Executive Education at MIT Sloan School. But today, Rob asked me to tell you, this audience, a little bit more about some interesting work that we have been doing and involved in over the last year or two in the realm of what's called the Internet of Things. So I have a few slides to go through, and as Rob mentioned, we'll be happy to have some Q&A at the end. I will now turn off my video feed if you see that change, so that I can switch to the presentation mode. Here we go. So, the Internet of Things, talent needs and challenges. First of all, maybe I should just try to define my terms a little bit. We've probably all heard a lot of hype about this thing called the Internet of Things. And indeed here we're looking at a chart of something which Gartner produces every year. They call their technology hype cycle. And here you can see that what Gartner does is tracks all kinds of technology that we hear about and read about in the press and media, and actually tries to assess where in the life cycle of the proposal, development, emergence, and ultimately implementation and widespread implementation and adoption are various technologies. And here you can see, if the print isn't too small, they track all kinds of things in biological sciences, medicine, high-tech, maybe not so high-tech, computing. And if you look at the shape of this curve, the reason they call it, I suppose, the hype curve is that it's measuring the expectations which Gartner is assessing from looking at the media coverage and presentation of these different topics. And right at the top of that peak, and this curve was data from 2014, you can see something called the Internet of Things has really reached, in 2014, the peak of being talked about and written about. What's kind of interesting about this curve as well, as you can see, as it moves over to the right, you go from that peak into a sort of a quite deep valley that Gartner calls the trough of disillusionment. And that's the time when maybe people are discovering that it's taking much longer for anything particularly interesting or useful to happen with this technology, this new technology that was being hyped not so long ago. And in some cases, things just seem to get stuck in that place, and they never really realize the potential that everybody thought they would have. In other cases, they start climbing out up this curve to the right and becoming sort of a reality in the marketplace and something that we've become very familiar with. And so the Internet of Things very much hyped in 2014. That's a time when we in Exec Ed here at Sloan started getting involved in some conversations about what this might all mean as well. If I jog to the next slide, we can see this is the same curve from Gartner, but from 2015, so a year later. And actually, you can see, interestingly, while many other things have moved around somewhat on there, some new things have appeared, some things have disappeared, there was the Internet of Things still very much at the top of the hype curve. And we haven't yet seen what the 2016 hype curve is going to be. Of course, these are published around sort of summertime by Gartner. But anecdotally, I would suggest that we continue to be hearing just as much about IoT and Internet of Things. And maybe a question that is on many people's minds as they read all of this is there still a lot of hype, or are we actually seeing things happen? So what do we mean when we talk about IoT? It's a very broad term, really. And as I've been attending over the last 2 or 3 years, quite a number of meetings on the theme of IoT, trying to figure out what should we be doing in Exec Ed here at Sloan that's helpful and relevant and to this emerging field. I think the definition that has resonated most for me and seems to be sort of the most broadly applicable is really one that just says that as a growing number of devices are getting connected to the internet, and they may be very smart devices, or they may be not so smart devices, like essentially sensors. And as those devices that are connected to each other over the internet actually are generating larger and larger amounts of data that flow through the internet to other devices and to various kinds of data centers and processing capabilities, that this is creating whole new ways of working, ways of playing, essentially, and really just ways of doing business and whole new business models. And when we did a review of, are there any particular industries or verticals where this sort of phenomenon of the IoT is more extensive, and you can see we start building out kind of a map like this of healthcare, manufacturing, smart cities. I mentioned the sensors, the energy industry. Ourselves in education are starting to experience what it means when people are turning up with highly connected devices, and so our classrooms are connected. In retail, we're seeing really, so in every sector of the economy, essentially, we're beginning to see this phenomenon of what happens when devices get connected to the internet, whether they're smart themselves or mostly sensors that are just creating these sort of vast amounts of data. Just to sort of put more of a picture to that, I think everybody now, of course, is familiar. This was a picture when I first started using it of an artist's impression of what a smartwatch might or an Apple iWatch might look like. And of course, that's gone in the last year or two from something which I think is inarguably, there was an awful lot of hype about it, and now we see many people wearing these kinds of devices. Here's another example of what we might mean by an IoT application. If people have been to visit Cambridge, certainly, or now certainly many other cities around in the US and other parts of the world, you might have come across these kind of connected trash cans. This is the Fat Belly compactor, and the trash can not only is able to send back a signal to the refuse company to tell it when it's full and needs emptying, and that has certain sort of efficiency and public management benefits. In fact, there are other side benefits that we hear about going on now. You can see this is just someone using it in the traditional way, putting some trash in there. But very many of these connected trash cans now are taking advantage of the fact that they have an internet connection, which is not being used that much for its main job, and helping create urban Wi-Fi micro networks. And so that's an example of the layering of applications that are going on. Another kind of application that we're hearing increasingly about, again, in sort of the smart city, civic government area, this is a street chart of that was taken a couple of years ago from a website in Chicago, where if you're a resident and more importantly a voter, when there's a snowstorm, you can actually log into this map, because the city of Chicago has now installed internet-connected GPS trackers to all of their snow plows. They're getting real-time data on where all the plows are. They're getting the ability to be much more efficient in terms of how they plan the plowing of streets during a snow emergency. And there's also, interestingly, a kind of a great side benefit that citizens actually get access to this data as well, and that they may believe that their neighbor's street is getting plowed more quickly and better than theirs because there happens to be an alderman living on it. But now there's real data that comes back and can illustrate what's actually going on, and really has been a tremendous success in civic government in the public sector. Another example we talk a lot about, in fact, is what's often described as the industrial internet. And that's really, we were talking about just now consumer devices, for example. The industrial internet is really what happens when you connect devices in industrial and manufacturing settings, and what some of the consequences of that are. We're looking now at an example that I have been fascinated by, which is the deployment of these IoT technologies in a very traditional heavy industry that is mining and mineral extraction. This is actually taken from a presentation that Rio Tinto gave a couple of years ago at the Internet of Things World Forum, where they were demonstrating an entirely automated, massive scale mine in the middle of nowhere in Australia, where every single vehicle is now massively instrumented and remotely operable, and all the human beings are able to be in a safe, air-conditioned city control room a long way away from the hot, dusty, and dangerous mine, which of course is a benefit in its own right, but there are other very significant business benefits from once you start putting these kinds of instrumentation and sensors everywhere. One of the things that we learned about is this huge amount of data being generated. You can see this 4.9 terabytes per day of data being generated from this mine. That's not only where is every single piece of equipment and what's it doing, but what's the soil chemistry, what's the topography. Every time on in a mine, it turns out that your maps are constantly out of date because the act of mining is removing material. And so this huge amount of data is providing a level of management information and insight that's just never been available before either. And it's creating interesting new opportunities, and with it, interesting new challenges. So, you can go from the industrial setting in the mine to the industrial setting in a pretty high-tech manufacturing or warehouse function. This is, again, illustrating an example of, as you can see from the photo, a pretty extensively robot-enabled, human, if not free, at least very light sort of manufacturing capability. Again, every single piece of equipment connected into central control systems, high degrees of automation. Just returning to some other applications, one of the things that we're also hearing a lot more about is the extent to which in many settings, as we get sort of devices that are connected, they really open up whole new sort of business models and ideas. This one is just a little bit fun, a fun one, which I included because I know that Rob, our host today, is an avid tennis player, and this is actually an internet-connected tennis racket. So you can actually get real-time updates and coaching via your phone from this internet-connected tennis racket. But of course, the other point is this is also generating a lot of data, which is getting, if you want fused into maybe your fitness applications, or conceivably in the future, perhaps your employer's health insurance company might like to take a look at that data if you give them permission to. And of course, the other area that is now becoming very a source of a lot of interest is in thinking about the automobile as a connected device. And just again to illustrate how rapidly this is all moving, here is a very futuristic photograph from an auto trade show just a couple of years ago, showing a particular German concept vehicle where they were talking about at some point in the perhaps distant future, all this interconnectivity in the automobile would help facilitate autonomous driving vehicles and so forth, and that was felt to be a long way in the future. And yet here, just a few months ago, is a picture of someone sitting in a US-made Tesla Model S, which is in fact a highly connected autonomous car, which gets, or car with some limited autonomy, which gets a major software upgrade every few months, and this is all happening, and it's happening right now. And so I included these few examples, both to sort of just whet our sort of appetites for what the range of applications of IoT is, and to make the point that it's not all hype. These applications are really happening, and they're actually multiplying very quickly. And one of the things that we're seeing with all of that development is we're running into questions of, so what are the key resources the business needs in order to be able to make these, to get real business benefits out of these technology and systems improvements and developments. And with that in mind was why over the last couple of years I've been getting involved in a meeting that I mentioned earlier, the Internet of Things World Forum, that was originally 3 years ago started by Cisco, but has now been joined by pretty much all of the major corporations that are involved in either creating or benefiting from this IoT phenomenon. And when I attend the annual meetings and some of the intermediate workshops of that organization, one of the things which we hear the most about what are the barriers and challenges that people are encountering is the question of talent. It's not the technology, it's not the standards of how do we connect these things together. It's certainly policy questions and concerns like, what do we do with all this data? What are the privacy implications? What are the international regulatory kind of questions and concerns that come in? There are even questions about sort of law enforcement and criminality and security. All those are real issues, but the one central thing that we keep hearing about and coming back to is that there are significant shortages of the talent that companies are saying that they need in order to really develop these applications. And that, of course, in the business that we're all in is an interesting thing to hear people from industry and business talking about. I've got some data I'm going to go through fairly quickly just so to illustrate where some of the talent gaps that we hear about are, and then I'm going to home in on some things that I think are more relevant to us as executive education schools and business schools. But just stepping back to the higher level to start with, where are some of the skill gaps that we're hearing about? Here's some data that Cisco actually pulled together a couple of years ago now, but it's still very relevant, illustrating that there are worker shortages to the tunes of millions of people in 2014 in subjects like security and networking and in data science. And data science, of course, particularly interesting for us in the business sense, being the people who actually, as data scientists, are able to make use of this sort of vast amounts of data that are being generated by all of these connected systems. We've also been hearing that this is there are some pretty, these shortages affect sort of skills availability and the needs of workers at every level. Here we have, I thought this was sort of delightfully ironic, we're talking about sort of high tech and the Internet of Things and everything being connected. And one of the companies that we heard talking at the IoT World Forum about some of the challenges that they're encountering was Xerox, and the example they gave is the connected photocopier. And so, interestingly, we still all seem to have these antique devices in our offices, but one of the observations that we were hearing was another area that there are shortages, and this is a management challenge for many of the organizations, or even at the level of the technicians and installers and service people and those sorts of things. And all those jobs are being changed enormously by the advent of these connected devices as well. Another way of looking at what the scale of this disconnect is. Here's some data that the company Career Builder put together over a period 2011 to 2014, showing some typical job titles that they've identified as being very central in companies that are developing IoT solutions. And you can see that the demand-supply ratio there, anywhere between 2 and nearly 10 to 1, really significant sort of shortages, and if you like, a failure at the moment in the jobs market. And a lot of this data that I've been able to collect so far has, is somewhat US-centric, but this shows that even in the US, there's a pretty wide distribution here. We're not just talking about jobs in Silicon Valley or even around MIT in the Northeast. There really is demand outstripping supply in all the major centers across the US, where not just technology businesses are based, but all the kinds of manufacturing and other applications of IoT. So one of the things that I found very fascinating, Cisco presented some work that they had done with Career Builder at one of these conferences, was sticking still with some of the more technology-focused jobs. What are the kinds of career pathways that people go through to end up in jobs that no one knew existed when they were training? How do you train for a job or for a career where the concept of that career doesn't even exist at the moment? So it was fascinating to see some of the pathways that people take through these. There's quite a few of these slides. I will just go through them a little quickly. But essentially, this just illustrates some of the examples of job titles that, again, Career Builder identified, and what the previous careers or jobs that people had that are in those roles. So I'm now highlighting a data scientist. And you can see people end up being data scientists from a variety of different backgrounds in engineering, in software, in the cybersecurity field. People might have got into it having started being network engineers or system administrators. Even in sort of the very trendy field of mobile app developers at the moment, many of us, if we live in the US, seen the adverts that are being run by companies like GE trying to recruit people into these fields because they're experiencing these shortages. And network programmers, again, we see a variety of different backgrounds that people are coming from. That companies are turning to find people that have these kinds of skills. So what are some of the things that employers are doing to try to respond to what they're experiencing as these shortages? Well, this is getting much more into sort of our bread and butter space in exec ed. Some of the things that we've heard reported and talked about, large companies that are turning up to these meetings with shortages are saying, is, of course, they're finding that they're having to invest more in how they recruit and develop staff into these critical roles. A lot of them, certainly we see here, 14% are saying that they're having to sort of pay premiums to recruit people into key roles. They need to be able to build these IoT businesses. And, a significant minority are having to be more structured and organized about how they think about providing these career development pathways into these critical roles. But what I found really fascinating when I start talking to these people who seem to be describing shortages in technical skills, what are the gaps that you're seeing in people that are causing you to have these vacancies in these essentially very often technical and engineering-led jobs? In fact, what we hear is the kinds of skills that they're experiencing or lacking are things that sound very familiar to us in the business school space. Sense making, people with high social intelligence and EQ, people who are capable of novel and adaptive thinking and being able to integrate across different domains of knowledge and expertise. People who have very strong cross-cultural skills and capabilities, and that's not just cross-cultural skills in terms of global or international dimensions, but also people who can cross different cultural skills between industries which are coming together in new ways, or different areas of capability, engineering and business, for example. And on that note, the idea of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, people who are not just specialists in one thing, but are able to really be broad as well as deep. And people who have also 21st century working skills around their ability to work in very dynamic, agile, and collaborative environments. This is all, when I hear these kinds of lists, you might, like me, be just turning your mind to our own executive education catalogs and programming and thinking, well, these are exactly the kind of skills that we think in the business of helping organizations to develop in their people and their organizations more generally. And that's something which for me has made this a very sort of exciting opportunity for us in the business school to be able to see new areas of application of the work that we're doing. We're all familiar, of course, Unicon produces a great deal of very informative research about what some of the learning trends are that how are companies responding from the point of view of approaches to development and learning. And of course, that is hopefully none of these are very surprising to anybody who is joining us from a Unicon school, that we're hearing very much from these large companies about the need or their desire to move from a learning world which was very classroom based and pre-scheduled and just-in-time learning, just-in-case learning, I beg your pardon, of skills and capabilities sort of a long time in advance of when they might be needed, to much more agile, just-in-time, unstructured, very often self-directed learning, much greater use of virtual learning resources to complement classroom and on-the-job learning and training. Interestingly, we're hearing significantly from these companies very often a move towards creating a world of work where employees themselves and professionals have to be much more responsible and accountable for their own learning and development needs, and not expecting that this is all going to be planned and handed to them on a plate in a sort of a command and control way by a traditional organization. And on that note, this is one of the themes that we're really hearing coming out of that very strongly, is companies saying to us, look, we need you to produce graduates, if we're talking about more of our undergraduate and graduate degree programs, but even out of our executive education programs. These fields are all changing enormously quickly, and the pace of that change is accelerating even more. The kind of agility that we need to have in our people means that please, higher education, you need to be producing people that have the skills and ability to continuously learn throughout their professional careers, to discover what their own new opportunities are going to be, to very often relearn new skills and capabilities. And interestingly also, the term that we're hearing a lot is the need to unlearn. That as in the case of the IoT, we're seeing the introduction of whole new business models, whether I could characterize even sort of a firm like Uber as being an example of an IoT-enabled business, because all those cars through their phones and the drivers are connected, and we have these sort of network effects in the new platform business model. Well, in fact, a lot of people in business and management perhaps have to unlearn some of the long-held beliefs about the fundamentals of how a business operates. And so this cycle, this continuous cycle of learning, relearning, and unlearning is something that we're hearing a latent demand, a pent-up demand from industry. That's what we need our people to have. and how are you in higher education, universities, and in business school actually going to be helping us with that? And again, just to illustrate the point that more and more of the conversations that we are all having, I believe, and it's certainly true of us at MIT, are very much dealing with this question of what's the relationship between what's the physical learning experience and the amount of impact that we can create out of the knowledge and capabilities that people are acquiring through that, and how does that increasingly connect to a virtualized way of learning in a more continuous basis. So we've been exploring here at MIT, and I'm sure many other schools involved in Unicon are doing this as well, in fields that are very relevant to IoT. Here's just a couple of examples of experiments that we've been doing at MIT on virtual learning in topics that are very relevant to IoT. This one happens to be big data. Again, sort of the question of these connected internet devices are generating terabytes of data a day. In the case of that Rio Tinto mine that I mentioned, then both the technological or the technical data analytics capabilities, but also the management capabilities that are required are both significant demands that we're hearing. And so here at MIT, we perhaps have the benefit of being very close to our colleagues in the schools of engineering and science. And so here are two examples of courses that were quite complementary. On the left, tackling the challenges of big data was a very sort of a MOOC-like online course that was rather technical. This slide, I think the first time it ran, over 4,000 people enrolled in that program at about $500 a person. Since then, it's run a few more times. I think we're well over 10,000 people have taken that course. And interestingly, if we looked at the demographics of who's doing that, certainly they include people who are in some of the more technical data analytics fields, but there's also a lot of people who are our traditional customers in executive education dialing into these rather more technical courses because they feel a need to understand and be able to work with this material. And so here on the right was an example of, we asked ourselves the question of, can we complement the more technical, very, very large scale training with something which has much more of the characteristic of executive education, where we can really, with management faculty, work with what are the business challenges that in this case big data creates, and can we still leverage, in this case, IoT type technologies like virtual classrooms, or indeed, some people might be aware that we have also been experimenting with another kind of connected way of enabling people to participate remotely without having to take the time and effort to travel here to MIT. Things like mobile telepresence robots, ways of participating in programs. And so we've been experimenting here at MIT with how do we respond from a curriculum point of view and from a delivery point of view to not only helping meet what are the needs that we're hearing about from our customers in the Internet of Things, driven by this phenomenon of Internet of Things. We're also very much experimenting with what does this mean for how we do what we do when we deliver our programs as well. In the meantime, we started talking or being asked by various of the companies that we were having these conversations with about their concerns about the pace of change that they were seeing from places like MIT, even doing some of these experiments with new courses, new ways of delivering courses that we were talking about, just saying this is just not going to scale quickly enough to have the kind of impact that we believe is needed to really realize the benefit of this whole IoT phenomenon. We're facing shortages, they say to us, of millions of people in these critical roles, and we just need things to move much more quickly than traditional academia, in our experience, has done. And in fact, Cisco pointed to us to something which happened in the past, when they were essentially very much involved in creating the technology that enabled 2 or 3 decades ago, the growth of the original internet, we all remember what that is, by creating all these routers and networking technology, and in fact ran into a similar kind of issue that there was no such thing as a network engineer at that point. Really wasn't, the career didn't exist, the concept of the job didn't exist, the ways of building those sort of capabilities, that talent pool, didn't exist. There was no way, if you were a company that was trying to hire people to implement a network like this, to be aware of, or to have any sense of what their level of competence really was. There were no sort of formal certifications or qualifications. And then that event, actually, Netscape, along with other companies that were sort of in this field, really started a whole new phenomenon of creating learning and training resources and certifications to build this human capital that was needed to be able to exploit the technological capabilities that they were creating in their business. A couple of years ago, one of the leaders at Cisco who was thinking about that history came up with the realization that something very similar is going on in the IoT space now, but that actually it's rather more complicated than it was when we were just talking about networking. Because with IoT, we're talking about the marriage of IT with the physical world and engineering and devices and manufacturing and chemical plants, and the healthcare system and smart cities. And this is just an enormously more complicated landscape, yet still has this challenge of there are whole new jobs and fields being created, and there's this whole talent shortage around those things. And so Cisco came up with this idea of bringing together a number of players from the supply and the demand side, from the technology side, from the management, the business side, to see whether it would be possible to come up with a way of responding more aggressively and collectively to this really critical talent shortage that they were identifying and experiencing. And essentially, Cisco, from those discussions, created an organization that has become called the IOT Talent Consortium. And you can see here, the vision here is really to be a coalition from every side of the platform, if you like, that is going to be required to solve the talent shortages that industry are facing around IoT, whether it's technical skills or management and leadership skills, which of course is what we're most interested in. We here at MIT Sloan Executive Education have become a founding member of the IoT Talent Consortium. You can see here the other members that came together initially, not only Cisco, GE Software, Rockwell Automation, Pearson, New York Academy of Sciences, Walt Disney Company, Fastlane, and ANI. So these were really half a dozen companies that came together and said, let's create an effort together to try to understand what are these talent issues and shortages, and how by acting in collaboration and coming together can we do something to accelerate the response that we need in order to be able to fill these talent shortages. So the vision that was created, and this organization is very new, it just came into existence during the second half of 2015, is really to do three things. One is to create, if you like, an information marketplace. That's in part about really trying to identify, to bring together important thought leadership about what is happening in IoT and the data about where the skills and talent shortages and requirements actually are. That's certainly one pillar of the vision. The second pillar of the vision, and this is a very practical and applied sort of approach, and it is much informed by the experience that Cisco went through decades ago in creating the whole new industries around networking. It is to create essentially a learning exchange which will become a clearinghouse or a platform that, informed by what these companies and educational institutions and other stakeholders coming together are going to craft as being our current and always being updated understanding of what are the key growth areas that are being fueled by IoT, what are the really critical skills and capabilities that are needed, and then what are the learning resources that people have access to that can enable them to really put themselves in a position to be able to build a career and take advantage of these very significant talent mismatches that there are at the moment if they're an individual learner or professional. And of course, if you're a company that's looking to build your workforce capability, you also hopefully have a keen interest in being able to see that there is a resource like this available and perhaps contributing learning materials to that resource as well. And so this is an opportunity that we're very excited about here at MIT, and I hope that, for other Unicon members, this could be a new and exciting marketplace for our leadership and management and business capabilities wares that are, I can tell you, extremely important to an area of a very significant gap that we're hearing from these companies. And then the third piece of the vision is ultimately when those two initial pillars are built, is for the whole consortium to operate ultimately as essentially almost like a talent market or a talent exchange, so that companies that are actually looking to recruit will be able to come and through joining the consortium get access to the people who are as professionals engaging in learning about the Internet of Things and what the opportunities are, and building their own skills through engaging with learning experiences and resources and everything from exec ed, which is very much what we're in, of course, through to more technical certifications and other ways of demonstrating and building their skills and capability. So this is the IoT Talent Consortium is a membership organization. We started with half a dozen founding members, and are now just entering a recruiting phase. And I would offline be very delighted to talk with anybody in the executive education field, particularly in our peers and colleagues in Unicon, that would like to learn more about the IoT Talent Consortium and why MIT is excited to be a part of it, and what opportunities there may be for you to learn more about what's going on in the IoT field by engaging with this organization, and perhaps have it also become not only a source of insight and inspiration for you in terms of this emerging new field and what the needs are, but also a way to get access to what's going to be a very large community of learners and professionals that are themselves building careers in this new field. So that's the end of my slides, and I believe Rob has been keeping an eye out if people have been asking any questions as I've been talking. So Rob, perhaps I can hand the controls back to you and answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Peter. A very insightful presentation covering a lot of material. So hopefully the audience enjoyed that. At this point, you are able to submit your questions through your control panel. Please type them into your question box and submit those, and we'll be able to share those with Peter as well. While people are formulating their questions and submitting those, just a couple that come to mind, Peter. It seems like the IoT really has a broad range of topics. It can go from sensors to strategy. What do you see are the challenges for executive education with a field that's so wide in terms of designing programs, either open enrollment or custom, to address the span of topics that are covered by the IoT?
Sure, thank you, Robert. This actually does capture what one of the biggest challenges around IoT actually is. It's just that it is such a diverse and extensive sort of set of topics and markets and verticals and capabilities. And so one way of thinking about that is is to try to break things down more into verticals. And so, for example, if I just run back, if I can, to the beginning of my presentation, you may recall I had a chart that put up a series of verticals. Here we go, which was taken from the IoT World Forum's working groups that did, in fact, sort of try to get both into verticals and horizontals. And so I think one of the challenges, if you think about how do we design curriculum, is should we target a single vertical? Should we have one of the IoT derived management and leadership issues if you're in the healthcare industry, or if you're in transportation, or in energy, or even in education? And that's certainly one possible approach. Equally, another take on this was to think more in terms of what are the horizontal themes that run across, maybe irrespective of what industry that you're in. And so an example of that would be to say, I think I mentioned earlier in the presentation, one of the strong sort of sets of themes are around issues around data security and privacy, and how those and data stewardship, particularly where you're dealing with a lot of data that may be sort of personal or sensitive in nature. And so thinking about a topic or a theme like that as being an organizing theme, and maybe I think as we think about designing executive education programs that are intended to be helpful to executives needing to understand what is IoT and what are the management challenges, what are the questions that they need to be asking of their organization. Not that I think in the executive education space, for example, our customers, generally speaking, are going to have the need or the desire to become deeply expert in those kinds of topics. So really the question for us is, how do we engage with our colleagues across campus so that in dialogue with them, we can understand from the computer scientists and the data engineers and other people, what are the questions that leaders and executives need to be asking their organizations to ensure that they are doing what they need to be doing to not only sort of survive, but to be able to seize these new opportunities.
Great, thank you. And another question, it seems like it's a highly technical field. In other similar fields, there data security and network security, there are often credentials or badges that are associated with training. Do you envision any similar equivalents in executive education programs dealing with IoT?
Yes, that's actually quite an intriguing and exciting thing that's happening in the Internet of Things Talent Consortium as well. Driven in many ways by the companies, the technology companies that are getting involved, whereas you've identified there is this tradition of sort of certifications and badging of qualifications that people have. There is definitely a desire to come up with a model for being able to, if not necessarily certify per se, at least be able to badge the kind of learning and experience and achievements and capabilities that people are developing and acquiring across potentially disparate both technology and other kind of disciplinary fields. And again, one of the challenges there, I guess, is that if you're an employer, then there is such a wide variety of different backgrounds that people may be coming from and qualifications and certifications they're bringing. If we go ahead to the chart I put up of the different career pathways that Career Builder were finding people had come through here, the cloud architect or the data scientist. If you're a poor employer trying to figure out, what's the relevance of the certifications and qualifications that people have across these sort of very disparate things. Oh, and by the way, I'd kind of quite like to know that someone is got skills around team leadership and project management and other things as well, then how do you get your arms around that? And so there is a group in the Talent Consortium that's in fact grappling with that question, and is going to be coming forward in the next 2 or 3 months with some proposals for creating a kind of a more integrated approach to reviewing different formal learning and certification programs and badging them in a way that will make them more meaningful to employers to be able to more quickly sort through, what does that say about the skills and the capability and the training that any individual has, even if they're across quite disparate technical fields, and for us quite exciting, incorporating what are key sort of leadership management skills and knowledge and capabilities and experiences that people might have as well. So our own sort of certifications can, we think, find their way into that from the executive education space as well.
Great, thank you. One of your slides covered the top 10 skills, and I think it was probably surprising to many of us that they weren't just technical skills, but there were in fact some of the things that executive education already does very well, like sense making through to virtual collaboration. To what extent do you think executive education departments can take existing programs or courses and apply them perhaps with a different lens to help IoT make advancements in things that we're already offering in executive education?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us in executive education, and particularly in universities, there's a part of this which in some ways might be something of a marketing-driven kind of question, which, as you've said, I sit in meetings of the Talent Consortium, for example, hearing companies bemoaning the kinds of management and leadership and soft skills that they're having difficulty recruiting for, and agility and business acumen, and the ability to really break the mold in terms of new business models and that kind of thing. And I just sort of mentally running through our catalog saying, yeah, we've actually got great courses and offerings that help people equip people with these kinds of skills already. But we tend in academia perhaps to have had a somewhat disciplinary approach, because we're in academia after all, to these topics, and so perhaps we're not really always converting the language that we talk about what we do into the language of the marketplace right now, and in particular the language of the issues and business challenges and business opportunities that these companies are actually facing. So I think, yes, certainly true of our portfolio here at MIT, and I think that because these are things which are pretty standard fare for all of us, ideas of sort of design thinking and social intelligence and teamwork and collaboration, and how to sort of use analytics to understand what's going on in a business, or thinking about disruptive business models. Most executive education programs in business schools, certainly the Unicorn members that I'm familiar with, are immediately applicable. And I think the question is, are we actually describing what we do in those terms, or are we still just talking about them in very academic, discipline-focused terms? And to the extent, one of the things that you might recall I mentioned was we're hearing from companies that they're saying to professionals and future employees, these are some of the things and skills that we think that we need right now. It's up to you to go out and develop yourself to be able to acquire those skills and capabilities. One of the consequences of that is, we're perhaps losing some of the intermediation of learning and development professionals, or say HR organizations that might sort of do that translation and historically. If we're needing to speak directly to the individual executive customer, then perhaps we need to get better than we have been in the past at sort of being able to illustrate and talk about the skills and capabilities that we can help people to build in terms of these 21st, 22nd century jobs and careers that people should be aspiring to or could be aspiring to.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, everybody, for listening.